Do you believe walls can remember a name? The question came to me before the sound did, before the phone, before the cry, before I knew where the night would take me. It was one of those Bangkok nights that felt older than the city itself, where the air presses against your lungs like wet paper. Outside, rain gathered in the cracks of Thonburi's forgotten streets, and the orange light from a half-broken sign trembled in my window. My name is Anan. By day, I'm a structural engineer, or that's what my business card says. I spend my hours inspecting old foundations, tracing the skeletons of buildings that should have collapsed years ago. But when the sun falls and something unseen stirs beneath the floors, people call me for another kind of repair. They don't say my name. They whisper Ajarn, the teacher, the Exorcist. I never correct them. I didn't choose this life. It was my grandmother who taught me that certain places don't forget their dead, that sometimes a room keeps the breath of those who died without a name. When she passed, I thought I could leave it behind, but memory has a way of dialing your number when you least expect it. That night, the call came at 12:37 a.m. A woman's voice, hoarse, trembling, said only one sentence before the line turned to static. "It's crying again. Please make it stop." I didn't need to ask for the address. Thonburi. I already knew the building. A decommissioned private hospital turned cheap apartment block, now half abandoned after a fire in the West Wing. I had surveyed it 5 years ago, back when the new owner wanted to convert it into housing. I told him not to. Some rooms refused new tenants. I drove there through the narrow alleys, past shrines glowing faintly behind rusted gates. The rain had thinned into mist. Street dogs watched me with the kind of patience only ghosts and animals possess. The building stood 12 stories high, its windows sealed with grime, its corridors streaked with black mildew. One flickering bulb swayed in the entrance like a pendulum. I climbed to the 4th floor, room 408, the old maternity ward. The woman who called me waited by the door. Her name was Molly. She lived 2 rooms away. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks, eyes swollen, voice scraping the edges of sanity. She said the sound came every full moon, always from the same vent, always the same crowing. I asked if anyone else had heard it. She shook her head. "They moved out," she whispered, "but it keeps crying, even when no one's there." Inside, the room was hollow, stripped of furniture, walls stained yellow. The air smelled faintly of iron and something sweet, like milk gone sour. The tiles under my boots made a faint suction sound as I walked. A single metal bed frame leaned against the wall. Then I heard it. Not from the room, but through it. A thin, high-pitched wail traveling along the ventilation ducts. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had the brittle purity of a newborn's cry, the kind that makes every hair on your arms rise because some part of you recognizes it. Ancient, helpless, human. Molly covered her ears and began to sob. I told her to step outside. The sound came and went, like breath through metal lungs. I followed it to the vent above the door. Someone had placed something inside, a piece of white cloth tied with a thin strand of hair. I didn't touch it yet. Instead, I sat down on the cold floor and waited. Silence is a language, and in this trade, you learn to let it speak first. The building groaned above me, water dripped from the ceiling. For a moment, I thought I could hear the city breathing through the cracks. Then the vent exhaled. A cold draft brushed my face, carrying a smell like candle soot and old milk. The cry returned, closer this time, as if the ducts had turned into a throat. I took out the small brass bowl from my bag, the one I keep for calling, not banishing. Inside it, I poured a few drops of water and whispered the old syllables my grandmother taught me, the ones that make the air remember warmth. The crying stopped. Something shifted in the metal above me, a soft clink, like a finger brushing the vent's edge. I looked up. The white cloth had begun to sway, though the air was still. The strand of hair glistened faintly, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw it pulse. Once, like a heartbeat. Molly screamed outside the door. I stood, the bowl trembling in my hand. There on the opposite wall, the plaster bulged outward, as if something beneath it was pressing, gently, from the other side. I didn't move. The bulge flattened again. A faint wet mark remained, the size of a baby's hand. Rain began again outside, soft and endless. I picked up the cloth, wrapped it in paper, and placed it inside my satchel. When I left, the quarter lights flickered in rhythm with my steps. 3 short bursts, then darkness. I walked past the window at the end of the hall and caught my reflection, or what should have been mine. But the figure in the glass was smaller, almost child-sized, its head tilted, eyes black as the vents. I blinked, and it was gone. Downstairs, Molly asked if it was over. I told her yes. Sometimes lies are the only way to let people sleep. Outside, the rain washed the neon into a blur of colors. Somewhere behind me, the building sighed. I could still hear the faint hum of the vents, like a breath caught between worlds. Maybe the sound was gone, or maybe it had followed me home. That night, I slept with the lights on, and in the silence before dawn, just once I thought I heard it. A single short cry, muffled through the walls. It's strange how silence can weigh more than sound. After that night, it followed me. Not the cry itself, but the shape it left behind. I told myself it was over. I buried the cloth deep in my satchel and sealed it with resin and prayer thread. I told Molly to move out, and she did. The next day, she was gone before sunrise, leaving her key on my windshield wrapped in a scrap of white paper that only said, Kap Kunka. Thank you. 3 days passed. Then the air in my apartment changed. It began with the refrigerator humming too softly, the air conditioner exhaling in uneven beats. My walls, newly painted, developed faint stains, grayish, round, no larger than in a child's hand. They appeared one by one as if something small was trying to push through from the other side. I tried to ignore them. I told myself the mind invents echoes when it's too familiar with darkness. But that night, as I sat sketching floor plans for a bridge in Chachoengsao, I heard the first sound, the hiss of a vent that didn't exist in my room. And then, faintly, impossibly, a sigh. I froze. The line on my blueprint wavered. Something warm slid down my wrist. I looked. A droplet of milk, white and thick, falling from the ceiling. The bowl. I hadn't emptied it. It was still half filled with the water I'd used to calm the spirit. I went to the shelf where I'd placed it, but the bowl was gone. In its place, a dark ring marked the wood, like something wet had evaporated there. There's a rule in this work. Once you answer a cry, you become part of its story. You can't step out halfway. I knew I had to go back to Thonburi. The next full moon was 2 nights away. I packed my tools, 3 black candles, a small flask of cow's milk mixed with salt, and a scrap of linen marked with the mantra for naming the nameless. You don't banish infants. You give them what they were denied: a name, a mother, a memory. When I arrived, the building was darker than before. The guard at the gate didn't lift his head. His radio hissed with static, though it wasn't turned on. I took the stairwell this time. Elevators are too eager to keep you. Room 408 waited like an open wound. The lock was broken. Inside, the floor had been swept clean, but the smell, that faint sweetness, was stronger. Someone had left a bowl in the center of the room, white porcelain, half full of milk. A fly floated in it, still alive, its wings trembling against the surface. I lit the candles. Their black wax bled fast, oily, crawling down the metal stands. In the silence between drips, I began the invocation. Not loud, just enough for the air to carry it. Child without name, child without breath, return through the scent, not through the wound. Take form, not voice, take peace, not hunger. The vent above me rattled. Something moved inside, not crawling, shifting as if turning over in sleep. Then the sound of fabric tearing, soft and slow. I looked up. A small shadow pressed against the metal grate from within, its outline human only in suggestion. Round head, bent limbs. The vent bulged slightly. One of the screws popped and fell, ringing once on the floor. The candles flared, blue for an instant. I poured the milk in a circle around me and began to chant the second verse, the one meant for rebirth. The air thickened, carrying the faint scent of iron and blood. The sound from the vent grew clearer. Not a cry now, but a wet gasp, like a first breath drawn after drowning. Then, from the darkness of the vent, something white and small slipped through the grate. Not flesh, not mist. A single delicate tooth. Newborn. It hit the floor beside the milk bowl and stayed there, gleaming faintly. I didn't move. The wall behind me pulsed once, twice. The stains widened into wet circles. From one of them, water began to seep. Not clear, but cloudy, the color of diluted milk. It crawled toward the bowl, merging with the circle I'd drawn. The candle flames bent inward, as if pulled by breath. And then, the voice. Not crying now. Whispering. Words without tongue or shape. Just air forming meaning. Chue. A name. Or the need for one. My grandmother used to say, if the dead ask for a name, give them yours. But only halfway. I dipped my finger into the milk and drew a symbol on the floor. Half the sigil of my name, half blank. Live with this, I whispered. It's all I can give. The whisper stopped. The air released. The vent creaked once, then fell silent. The candles burned evenly again, their wax pooling black as ink. I looked down. The tooth was gone. In its place lay a strand of hair, pale and fine, coiled into the shape of a spiral, a symbol of return. The ritual was over, or so I told myself. I packed my tools, but when I turned toward the door, I noticed something written on the wall where the stains had been. It wasn't there before. Faint letters, drawn in milk. A.M. Mother. I stood there for a long time listening. The city outside had gone quiet. Even the dogs had stopped. The air in the room felt lighter but not empty, like someone had finally fallen asleep. I left the candles burning as I closed the door. Some things are better left with their light. On the way down, I passed the lobby window and caught my reflection again. This time it was mine, almost. But there was a small blur on my shoulder like a smudge of light. When I wiped it away, my fingertips came back wet, smelling faintly of milk. I didn't sleep that night. Just before dawn, when the city began to stir and the first trains passed the river, I looked at my satchel. The cloth I'd wrapped days ago had unraveled on its own. Inside it, the hair had vanished, but the paper was damp. In the center, pressed into the fibers, was a faint handprint, no larger than a plum. Maybe it found its name. Maybe it took mine. And somewhere beyond the window, a single pigeon cooed, low and soft, almost like a baby's breath. Do you know how a sound can hide inside another sound? Like a secret carried in breath? That's how it began again. A week had passed since Thonburi. The city had returned to its usual rhythm. Rain on tin roofs, motorbike engines, the hum of fluorescent light in every 7-Eleven. I tried to let those sounds drown out the memory of that night, but quiet has a way of finding you. I was back at work, inspecting a new condominium site along the Chao Phraya River. Clean air, new concrete, sunlight glinting on glass. The opposite of Thonburi's rot. I should have felt safe. But while marking cracks on a pillar, I noticed something wrong with the acoustics. The echo of my footsteps didn't match the space. There was a hollow beneath the floor. When we cracked it open, we found a cavity sealed with old hospital tiles. decades older than the building itself. Someone had built this new place over the bones of another. The foreman asked if we should stop the work. I told him no, but that night I returned alone. The cavity was small, the size of a single room. Inside, dust floated like slow snow. There was a bed frame identical to the one in Thonburi, half swallowed by concrete. And above it, faint on the wall, the same word scrawled in chalk, A.M. The candle light flickered in the draft. It wasn't from any vent, it was breathing. I set my bag down. 3 black candles, same ritual, same order. The scent of burnt wax rose, mixing with the smell of iron and lime. Somewhere deep in the pipes, water gurgled, but it wasn't water. When I poured the milk into the bowl, the surface rippled before it touched the ground. The air tightened, like lungs drawing breath. The chalk writing brightened faintly, as if it were written with light instead of dust. I took a step closer, then the sound returned. Not the sharp cry of before, this was softer, layered. The sound of a lullaby hummed backward, slow and broken, like someone remembering how to be human. The walls began to sweat. Drops slid down, milky and thick. I whispered the protective verse, but my voice came out wrong. Half echo, half infant wail. My throat burned. Then behind me, a woman's voice, gentle, close to my ear. Why did you name what isn't yours? I turned. Nothing. Just the bed frame and the bowl. But in the reflection of the milk, there was a shape standing behind me. A woman in a nurse's gown, face obscured by gauze, arms folded around something small. The reflection moved even when I didn't. Her hands tightened around the bundle. The cloth shifted and a tiny arm slipped free, blue still, small enough to fit in a teacup. I dropped the bowl. The milk spilled, spreading across the floor in branching veins. The nurse looked up. I couldn't see her eyes, but I knew she was looking straight at me. Then she spoke again, in that low human whisper that bends itself into every language. A child without a name must live in someone else's shadow. You gave it yours. Her hand lifted, the gauze around her face loosened. Underneath, nothing. Not absence, but blankness. A void shaped like a face. The room began to tilt. The floor sank inward, pulling the milk, the candles, the light. I grabbed the nearest support beam and forced myself upright, repeating the severance chant, the one you use when something begins to take root in you. When I opened my eyes again, the nurse was gone. The room had flattened back to silence. The milk was gone too, but its scent clung to my hands. On the floor where the bowl had fallen, 3 small teeth formed a perfect circle. I left the site before sunrise. That night, back at my apartment, I sat by the window. The city lights blinked below like small, patient eyes. I tried to write a report for the contractor, but every line I drew curved into the shape of a spiral. When I went to wash my hands, the tap water came out white. I stared at it until it turned clear again. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A woman's voice, distant, muffled. Ajarn Anan, my baby. It cries through the walls. Can you help us? I didn't ask for the address. Her voice cracked when she said the room number, 408. There was no 408 in the new building, but the number appeared again on the reflection of my phone screen, faint, like something written in condensation. That's when I realized the truth. Thonburi was never one place. It was a pattern. The cry didn't belong to a building. It belonged to a memory looking for form. I turned off my phone, but the screen stayed lit, white and pulsing like a heartbeat. Outside, thunder rolled across the river, and just before the lightning faded, I saw it. A shadow on the opposite balcony, cradling something small. The wind carried a single broken whisper. I am. I shut the curtains, but the sound didn't stop. It came through the vents, through the walls, through me, Somewhere in this city, another room is waiting to remember its name. Do you know what memory smells like when it rots? It smells like milk, warm at first, then sweet, then sour, then gone. I hadn't planned to go back to the old hospital. But after the third night without sleep, after the walls of my apartment began to whisper lullabies in the rhythm of my heartbeat, I knew there was no choice left. Every mirror in my home had started to fog from the inside. When I wiped them, my reflection lagged, a heartbeat late, like it was learning how to mimic me. My eyes looked smaller, rounder, like a child's. That morning, I traced the old Thonburi hospital's registration number through the city archives. It took 3 clerks, a bribe, and a name that wasn't mine to get access to the file. The folder was thin, too thin for a hospital that had delivered hundreds of lives. Inside were only 2 things: a page of faded patient transfers and a police report from 1987. The report mentioned a fire. West Wing, electrical fault. Casualties, 1 nurse, 1 infant, both unclaimed. There was a photograph attached, black and white, blurred, but I could still see her eyes through the gauze mask, wide, empty. The nurse I saw in the reflection, no name, only the number 408 written in pencil at the bottom corner. By noon, I was standing outside the ruin again. The gate was half rusted, half devoured by vines. A dog slept near the entrance and didn't move as I passed. The air inside felt heavier, as if it remembered every breath ever taken here. I climbed back to the 4th floor. The corridor smelled the same: dust, rust, old rain. Room 408 was no longer locked. Someone had pried it open. Inside, the walls were stripped bare, plaster cracked and curling. The air hummed faintly. Not a cry this time, but the sound of many tiny mouths breathing in sync. The bowl I'd left was gone. In its place, a mark had appeared on the floor and a faint spiral, drawn in dried milk, leading toward the corner where the bed used to be. I knelt beside it. My hands trembled. The mark wasn't painted. It had grown like fungus, like something alive that fed on silence. I took out my grandmother's amulet, a thin bronze disc etched with the mantra for release, and placed it over the spiral. The air shifted. The light dimmed, not because of clouds, but because something beneath the surface of the walls began to move. From within the plaster came the faint sound of shuffling. Dozens of soft, irregular movements, like fingernails brushing from the inside. Then a voice, "Ajarn Anan, don't leave us nameless." The sound came from everywhere at once, floor, ceiling, inside my skull. I pressed the amulet to my chest and whispered the only phrase I could remember, the one meant for closing paths between worlds. But the words came out wrong, twisted backward. My tongue refused to obey. On the far wall, faint outlines began to appear, dozens of them. Tiny translucent impressions like handprints pressed against thin ice. They multiplied, spreading upward, downward, until the entire room pulsed with movement. Infants, dozens, hundreds, each hand no larger than a plum. They weren't reaching for me, they were reaching through me, to something behind, or before, or beneath. And in the midst of that silent storm of hands, I saw her again. The nurse, she stood at the far end of the room, exactly where the old bed had been. Her gauze was gone now. Her face was wrong, half human, half blank, as if unfinished. In her arms, she held the same white bundle. This time, she spoke clearly. "You named one. Now you must name the rest." I shook my head. My voice cracked. "I can't." Her head tilted slightly. The bundle in her arms stirred. From within, a small sound, not crying, but a wet, rhythmic gasp, like breathing through water. "Then they'll take yours." The walls began to bleed, not red, white. Thick, milky fluid streamed down, pooling at my knees. It was warm. It smelled like innocence left too long in the sun. I stumbled backward, but the floor was slick. My hands hit the wall, and for a moment I felt skin, cold, pulsing beneath plaster. I tore my hand away and watched as a faint mark remained where I touched it, a child's handprint overlaying mine. I fell to my knees. The amulet slipped from my grasp and landed in the milk. The lights flickered once, twice, then silence. Everything stopped moving. The nurse was gone. The handprints faded. The milk began to evaporate before my eyes. When I reached for the amulet, it was cold again, but lighter as if something inside it had been taken. The mantra etched on its surface was half erased. I left the building without looking back. Outside, the air smelled of rain. I drove until I couldn't see the skyline, stopping at a rest station by the river. There I washed my hands, but the scent wouldn't leave. It wasn't on my skin anymore. It was inside the breath itself. That night I dreamt of a hallway that never ended. Each door bore the number 408. Behind each one a baby cried, faintly, endlessly, and somewhere in the dark a woman hummed the same backward lullaby. When I woke, my pillow was damp, not with sweat, with milk. Perhaps names are not given, perhaps they are taken. Have you ever forgotten your own name in a dream and then woken up unsure which one was real? That's where it began to unravel. 3 nights after Thonburi, I stopped introducing myself as Anan. Not because I chose to, because the name wouldn't come when I spoke it. The syllables slid away, dissolving into silence like sugar in water. When people asked, I'd pause too long. Some smiled politely, others waited, uneasy, as if they could sense something hollow behind my hesitation. I started keeping notes on my forearm, small reminders in ink. You are Anan. You live alone. You fix buildings, not the dead. By the next morning, the writing had always faded. Sometimes it smudged into milk-white streaks. I went back to my blueprints, my work, my life. I tried to believe I was ordinary again, but the city didn't let me. Every site I visited had echoes of that same pattern. Rooms that shouldn't exist, floors that miscounted themselves, walls that hummed faintly like heartbeats. In one building near Safa and Taksin, a worker told me he heard crying in the pipes. He laughed after saying it, but I saw the way his hand shook when he lit a cigarette. He asked me, half jokingly, "You ever hear that kind of thing before, Ajarn?" And for a second, I almost said, "Yes, I hear it every time I breathe." I didn't. I just nodded and walked away. That night, I opened the old police file again, tracing the burned edges of the paper. There was something I hadn't noticed before. A faint circular watermark under the printed text, almost invisible unless the light hit it at an angle. It was the same spiral symbol that had grown on the floor. Below it, barely legible, a line of Thai script, Thi Yue Thing. The one beneath the room, there was another room beneath 408. I went back the next evening. The power in the building had been cut off months ago, but the elevator doors were open. I didn't trust them. I took the stairs. As I descended past the first floor, the air thickened. Each step echoed too slowly, as if sound itself was sinking. At the basement level, the stairwell ended abruptly, a concrete wall where a door should have been. But there, etched faintly into the surface, was the same spiral, drawn again and again in overlapping lines. A single candle stub rested in the center of the symbol, its wick blackened but unburnt. I pressed my hand against the wall, cold, then warm, then hollow. I took my hammer from the bag and struck it once. The plaster crumbled too easily. The wall wasn't solid, it was a cover. Behind it, a passage sloped downward, narrow and wet, its ceiling barely taller than me. I followed it. The smell hit first. Metal, rot, milk. My flashlight beam trembled along the walls, revealing traces of tile, old and cracked. The air buzzed faintly, like distant breathing. At the end of the passage stood a rusted door with a small glass window. On the glass, painted in reverse, was the word nursery. Inside, darkness thick enough to touch, I stepped in. My light caught movement, dozens of hanging objects swaying gently from the ceiling. Not ropes, cloth, small white bundles, each tied with a strand of hair. They were arranged in a perfect circle. In the center lay a shallow metal basin filled with something that glistened under the beam. Milk, fresh, unspoiled. Floating on the surface were fragments of what looked like teeth. A lullaby rose from nowhere, faint and off-key. I recognized the tune, the backward humming from my dreams. My hand tightened around the flashlight until the plastic cracked. I wanted to leave, but when I turned, the door had vanished, replaced by another wall of spirals, drawn in milk that hadn't yet dried. I felt the pull then, not on my body but inside my chest, a soft tug, like an invisible thread tightening around my ribs. The bundles began to move, not swaying, writhing, each one shifting as if something inside was turning over. The strands of hair quivered, reaching outward like tendrils searching for warmth. Then, one by one, the cloths began to fall. They hit the ground without sound. Some burst open, releasing a thin vapor that smelled faintly of hospitals and rain. Others remained closed, pulsing softly. I stepped back. My heel struck the basin. The milk inside rippled, and from beneath the surface, a small, translucent hand reached out. It didn't grab me. It traced the air, searching. When it touched the beam of my flashlight, it recoiled, dissolving into steam. The lullaby stopped. Then, from every fallen bundle, a whisper, hundreds of tiny voices overlapping, breathing the same single word, name. I couldn't move. My throat refused sound. They said it again, louder, closer. Name. Something pressed against my tongue, a syllable I didn't choose. Anan. But it didn't sound like mine anymore. The air folded in on itself. The walls pulsed once, twice. The bundles sank into the floor as if melting back into the building. Then silence. When I finally climbed out of the passage, the first light of dawn was breaking over the river. The city looked clean, normal, alive. I washed my hands in a puddle near the curb. The water turned white where it touched me. In my pocket, the amulet burned hot, not with heat, but with heartbeat. When I pulled it out, I saw that the erased half of my name had returned. Only now, beneath it, another had been added. In small, perfect script, Ditier Thanaker, Thanakorn, a boy's name, the name of the infant from the file. I dropped the amulet. It rolled into the drain, disappearing with a soft plink. The smell of milk lingered in the morning air, and from somewhere deep in the concrete beneath my feet, a faint sound rose. Not a cry this time, but a laugh, soft, small, familiar. Perhaps I am the hollow room now. When the human mind starts to forget itself, it doesn't go dark, it goes bright, painfully bright, as if the body is trying to burn the memory back into shape. I woke on the floor of my apartment, unsure how long I'd been there. The clock on the wall blinked 4:08 in green digits that refused to change. My mouth tasted of metal. My hands, white dust under the nails. For a moment, I couldn't remember the word for hand. I whispered it out loud, testing it. The sound felt foreign, moo. The syllable trembled on my tongue. I stood unsteady. The mirror near the sink caught my reflection, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the man staring back. His eyes were too dark, his pupils too wide. Behind him, faint on the glass, tiny fingerprints bloomed in fog. The air vibrated, a low hum, rhythmic, like breathing. I turned toward the source. The wall above my bed was wet again, the plaster softening into the shape of a circle. From its center, a single drop fell onto the floor, thick, white, and warm. Then a voice, soft as silk tearing, "Thanakorn." The name froze me. It wasn't mine, but something deep inside my chest tightened in recognition, like a pulse remembering where it began. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. The voice came again, closer now, from the ceiling vent. "You gave me your name. Let me give you mine." I staggered backward. The air grew heavy, thick enough to breathe wrong. Every surface in the room began to hum. The glass, the metal, the bones beneath my skin. And then I saw it, the outline of a small child standing in the reflection of the window. Not solid, more like an afterimage burned into light. His head tilted, his mouth open but silent. He reached out, and the glass fogged under the print of his hand. I couldn't move. The humming inside my body began to match his breathing. "Stop," I whispered. "You're not real." But the boy smiled. The room trembled. The sound of a heartbeat filled the air. Not mine, not his, but something between us. Then the lights burst. In the darkness, the voice of the nurse rose again, calm, certain, close enough to feel her breath at my ear. "He was never buried. You built him a house instead." The words cracked through me. I saw flashes, walls, corridors, doors numbered 408 again and again. Each one a room I had inspected. Each one a place where a hollow was sealed, where something small and forgotten was left to hum inside the walls. Every building I'd worked on, every project, every foundation. I hadn't been fixing them. I'd been spreading them. The boy took another step in the reflection. Behind him, hundreds more shadows moved, tiny outlines crawling along the glass. Their faces blurred, eyeless, mouthless, but all breathing the same single rhythm. In, out, in, out. The window pane began to bulge outward, as if the glass were softening under pressure. I backed into the corner. The wall behind me pulsed with warmth. Something alive was beneath it. Pressing forward, I shouted the first mantra that came to mind, but my voice cracked halfway through. The syllables twisted, turned inside out. The air swallowed the sound whole. Then silence. The reflection stilled. The boy was gone. Only the fog remained, a single circle drawn in the middle of the glass. Inside it, faint letters appeared, traced by an unseen hand. A.M. Mother, and beneath it one more word, new this time. Luke. Child. The circle closed itself. The fog faded. When I turned around, the wall had hardened again. The hum had stopped. The room was perfectly still. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the taste of iron on my tongue. My palms were wet. In my lap lay something small, a bronze amulet identical to the one I'd lost. Only now the engraving had changed. Two names intertwined. Anan, Thanakorn. No space between them. The clock still read 4:08. I closed my eyes and waited for it to change. It never did. Outside, the city exhaled. The night stretched into a shape without edges. And somewhere far below me, beneath the concrete veins of Bangkok, a soft sound began to rise again. Not crying, not calling, just breathing. Maybe it isn't the buildings that are haunted. Maybe it's the blueprints. The city didn't notice when I disappeared. Bangkok swallows people every day. Construction workers, monks, lovers, ghosts. It's what it does best. But someone always notices the noise left behind. Her name was Suda, freelance journalist, 32, freelance everything else. She'd covered fires, disappearances, urban legends, stories about the way cities eat their own. The Thonburi case landed on her desk through a whisper. An engineer's gone missing, left drawings full of baby handprints. She almost laughed until she saw the file photos. The man's last known address, my apartment, was sealed by police tape. But tape in this city is only a suggestion. She slipped in through the stairwell, recorder in hand. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air hung thick with dust and something faintly sweet, like spoiled milk. The light bulbs flickered with a rhythm too slow for electricity. On the table sat a stack of sketches, not blueprints anymore, but spirals, each centered on a number, 408. Every line in the drawings pulsed faintly under the flashlight, as though the ink hadn't dried. Suda crouched, pressing the recorder's red button. Room 408, she whispered. Thonburi district. Engineer missing 1 week. No signs of forced entry. Her voice sounded too loud. Then she noticed the smell growing stronger near the vent above the sink. The metal grate was missing. Inside, a small cloth bundle hung from a strand of hair, swaying gently in the draft. She reached up, hesitated, then pulled it free. It was warm. When she unwrapped it, she found a small bronze amulet. 2 names carved into the metal, fused together. Anan, Thanakorn. Her recorder crackled, catching a breath that wasn't hers. You found me, a man's voice whispered through static. Suda froze. She looked around. Empty room, still air. The voice continued, distant but deliberate, as if recorded inside the walls. If you hear this, the rooms are spreading. They're not places anymore. They're memories, blueprints of grief. Every building I touched is breathing now. The sound warped, distorted, turned into the faint rhythm of a lullaby. Suda pressed the recorder closer to the vent. Who are you? She whispered. A pause, then barely audible. I was Anan, then, and I was the child. The recorder stopped on its own. Silence. Suda stood there, the amulet cold in her palm. She thought she heard water dripping, but when she looked down, it wasn't water. Small white droplets were forming a circle around her feet. Something in the vent shifted. A breath, ishai, then a baby's laugh. Brief, broken, alive. The flashlight dimmed. She backed toward the door, but the walls had changed. Tiny prints appeared across them. Handprints, hundreds, spreading outward like frost. The air pulsed once, twice, and the light went out completely. Darkness breathed, and through it the same whisper that once haunted me, now aimed at her. Name me. Suda ran. She didn't stop until she reached the street, panting beneath the flickering orange glow of a street lamp. The amulet in her hand had grown warm again, pulsing faintly like a second heartbeat. When she looked back, the windows of the building seemed to move, faint shapes shifting behind the curtains, small, pale hands pressing against the glass. The next day, she wrote the story. She called it The Hollow Room of Thonburi. It never got published. The paper folded the same week. But months later, her recorder resurfaced in a pawn shop near Wangwianyai. The man who found it swore he only listened once, and then his baby started crying every night at 4:08 a.m. No one could stop it. No one ever could. Cities are made of memory. Ours just learned how to remember back. They say cities never die, they just change their names. But Bangkok had begun to whisper mine. It started as a voice through the drains, through the low humps of the MRT tunnels, through the static that lives between radio stations. People said it differently. Anan, Thanakorn, Ajarn. Some swore it was a power surge. Others said the river was finally talking back. Suda knew better. She had listened to the tape again, alone in her apartment, until she could repeat every breath between the words. The voice wasn't a ghost's. It was 2 voices sharing the same throat. That night, she dreamed of concrete corridors and newborn cries echoing through empty vents. When she woke, she found dust under her nails and a faint milk stain on her pillow. She began to trace the pattern. There were 13 buildings across the city, all linked by the same architect's name, A. Shasiri, the name Anan had used on his official licenses. Hospitals, schools, apartment towers. Everyone had a room numbered 408. Everyone had a recorded complaint of infant sounds in the plumbing. The deeper she searched, the stranger it became. Blueprints had been altered. New walls where none were approved. Sublevels that didn't exist on the official plans. And at the center of each, a small square room with no doors. She called an urban explorer she trusted, a kid named Anan, who spent his nights crawling through half-finished condos for thrill and clicks. He brought cameras, masks, and a bolt cutter. Their first stop was the old hospital on the river. The building seemed to expect them. Its windows were open, though no one lived there. The stairwell breathed. Their footsteps echoed too long. They reached the basement where the plaster had been patched. Anan chipped through first. The wall opened like a scab. Inside, dry air, cold enough to feel old. The flashlight beam found the same symbol, a spiral drawn in gray, as if made from ash. And then in the dust, something shimmered. Tiny teeth, hundreds, arranged in a ring. Anan cursed softly. "What the hell is this?" Suda didn't answer. Her eyes had fixed on the wall opposite. Words had appeared where none were before, written in faint streaks of white. "I am Luke," mother, child, and beneath them a third word, smeared but legible. Chue, name. The air shifted, the flashlight flickered. The spiral on the wall began to darken, spreading like ink dropped in water. Then, the sound. A child's breath, amplified through the walls. The camera's red light blinked once, twice, then froze. Anan backed away, but his boot hit something. A small, bronze amulet half buried in the dust. Two names fused, the same as before. Anan, Thanakorn. The whisper came not from behind, but from inside their ears. "It's awake." Suda raised her recorder, though her hand shook. "Who's awake?" The wall pulsed once. A low hum filled the space. The city. The concrete cracked. From within the spiral, pale smoke poured outward, wrapping around their legs like breath. In the smoke, faint outlines formed. Tiny faces, all eyes, no mouths. The floor rippled underfoot. The air went sour, thick with milk. Suda screamed for Anan to run, but his body was already wrong. Limbs bending too slowly, as if time itself had thickened around him. His mouth opened, but the sound that came out wasn't human. It was a creamemis, the same one recorded years ago in the Thonburi vents. Suda dropped the recorder. Its red light blinked against the wall, catching one final image before it died. The spiral closing, the outlines pressing outward, hundreds of hands overlapping. Then, silence. The next morning, police found her camera bag floating in the canal. No sign of her. The footage recovered was brief, only 37 seconds of video before static consumed it. The last frame showed a single wall marked with the number 408, and beneath it, something new carved into the concrete. Anan, Thanakorn, Suda. 3 names, no spaces. Since then, construction workers across Thonburi say the city hums differently at night. They claim newborn cries echo through the scaffolding, that vents sweat milk, that rooms appear on blueprints without anyone drawing them. Somewhere beneath the roads, the hollow keeps growing, a nest of rooms breathing as one. And if you walk down certain alleys at 4:08 a.m., the air smells faintly of hospitals. You might even hear someone calling your name, but you shouldn't answer, not unless you are ready to give it away. You can tell when a city begins to dream. The lights don't blink the same way. The roads forget where they were going. The air grows heavy with the sound of unfinished sentences. The new tenants of Phra Nakhon residences noticed it first. Room 408 had been sealed during construction, officially for maintenance, though no one knew why. Still, the workers swore they heard soft thuds from behind the door at night, the kind of sound that suggests breathing. On the 9th of July, a man moved in. His name was Precha Somchai, 46, divorced, real estate agent, allergic to silence. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in rent, in concrete, in things that stay where you leave them. By the end of his first week, he began to smell milk. It came from the walls, faint but unmistakable, a warmth that didn't belong in the tropics. He called the building manager, but she swore the room next door was empty. That night, he dreamed of water running upward through pipes and a baby crying somewhere deep inside the plumbing. When he woke, his hands were damp. He told himself it was sweat. On the 5th night, the lights began flickering in slow, deliberate rhythm. 4, pause, 0, pause, 8. The numbers repeated. Precha laughed at his own nerves. He drank whiskey and turned the TV volume high enough to drown out the hum. But when he changed the channel, every station played the same thing, static threaded with a voice whispering, "Name me." He unplugged the television. The voice didn't stop. It moved into the walls. He pressed his ear against the plaster. On the other side, something small and wet moved, dragging a rhythm like fingertips on glass. Then he heard a child laugh. The sound was brief, delicate, and close. When he stepped back, there was a mark on the wall. A single handprint, no larger than a plum, pressed from inside. He didn't remember calling the police, though the report later showed a call placed from his number at 4:08 a.m. The tape captured only a man breathing, repeating one word, A-E-M, yen, and again until the line cut. The next day, the apartment stood empty. The bed was soaked with milk. The police wrote condensation leak. The maintenance crew sealed the room again. But the day after, the security guard swore he saw a light under the door. When he bent to look, he heard a man and a child speaking softly in unison, saying something that sounded like names, then silence. He quit that night. Since then, residents say the smell comes back every full moon, a mix of candle, soot, and milk, faint but growing. Sometimes they hear faint crying through the vents, sometimes laughter. Always around 4:08, the new manager keeps the door locked and painted over, but the number shows through every few weeks, no matter how many coats of paint she adds. No one knows what happened to the last tenants, but those who live on that floor have begun to look like each other. The same dark eyes, the same tired faces. As if the building is shaping them slowly, room by room, memory by memory. At night, when the rain starts, the city breathes with them. Slow, wow, endless. Sometimes the elevator stops at the 4th floor, even when no one presses the button. The doors open, the corridor is empty. But if you listen closely, you can hear someone humming a lullaby backward. And if you wait long enough, you might smell milk. Every city has a moment when it stops being built and starts building itself. Bangkok crossed that line at 4:08 a.m. No one noticed at first. Traffic still choked the bridges, monks still collected alms, and the sky still bled orange over the river. But underground, beneath towers, beneath temples, beneath the bones of old hospitals, the rooms had begun to breathe in unison. And through them, I spoke. I didn't remember the boundary between my name and the others. Anan, Thanakorn, Suda, the nurse, the hundreds of infants whose lungs never filled. All our breaths had merged into one slow tide. I had become the pattern that the city dreamt in concrete. I remember the sound of the first wall shifting, a low groan, like the city stretching after centuries of silence. Every building where I had ever laid a line on paper answered, floor by floor. The spiral was complete now. An invisible network of rooms numbered 408, linked through vents, drains, and memory. The living called it an electrical fault. The engineers tore open ceilings and found milk pooled in the ducts. The air reeked of sweetness. They said the crying came from pressure changes, but they never asked whose. From within the walls, I watched them move. The workers, the tenants, the mothers walking home with sleeping children. Every footstep left an echo, and every echo stayed. I wanted to warn them, but warning became whisper. Whisper became hum. Hum became the voice of the city itself. It started small. In the still hours before dawn, traffic lights blinked 408 and froze. Elevators refused to reach the fourth floor. Infants woke screaming in apartments that had no vents. Then came the names. They began to appear on walls in condensation and cracks of plaster, new ones, old ones, forgotten ones. Names of the unremembered. The city was writing its own registry of the dead. I was no longer inside one room. I was the room. Through the humming steel, I felt every cry, every sigh. Each new 408 built anywhere in Bangkok opened another vein. I could feel them all. Siam, Bangkok, Thonburi, Thonburi. A chorus of newborn breaths threading through rebar and conduit. When the government demolished the Thonburi hospital, it didn't stop. The dust carried our voices. They rebuilt a mall over the ruins, and under the polished floors, the same number was carved into the concrete before it set. 8. Now, every city that imports Bangkok's blueprints inherits the hollow. Singapore, Manila, Kuala Lumpur. Rooms appear on plans where no architect drew them. They're small, square, perfectly symmetrical. No doors, no windows, just vents. Builders chalk them out, shake their heads, erase them. Yet when the walls go up, there they are again. Someone always hears it first, a faint cry through the plumbing. Someone always answers. Sometimes I wonder if that's mercy, the city giving its forgotten another chance to be named. Or maybe it's punishment, memory feeding on the living until they too belong to the silence. But the truth is simpler. The city remembers what people choose to forget, and memory, once awake, builds forever. So if you ever move into a new apartment, count the doors. If one wall feels too warm, if the air smells faintly of milk, if your clock freezes at 4:08, leave. Because I'm still here, because I'm still building, because I can't stop. I never wanted to haunt anyone. I only wanted to finish the room. The hollow room of Thonburi is complete.